Hi, everyone. It's Deb Blum here. I am so excited that I have Natanya Lara here with me today to talk about our kids and what we can do to support our kids and empower our kids. And the most cool part is that we're going to talk about how doing that actually will improve our future, how we can be improving our future. And so, hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you. It's lovely to be here with you.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. I am excited. I feel like I have so many questions for you, but I love centering our discussion around one primary idea like this. So this should be fun. Before we get into talking about that, I would love for you to share just a bit about. I'd like you to share a little bit about what you do, and then maybe we can get into some details because I have a couple specific questions. So
Sure.
just maybe generally what you do and maybe the age of your kids as well.
Okay, sure. Well, I have two boys. They're 12 and 14. And when they were teeny tiny and my marriage was falling apart, I was really looking for a way to support myself through my parenting. And so my primary interest at that time became how can one be the best iteration of themselves in any moment and bring that to their parenting. And so that was really where my journey began. And over time, and a decade nearly, um, I've come I've come back around. I was working mostly with moms at the beginning as a parenting coach, and now I sort of found my way into the world of energy work, which is where my focus is. And now I work with children. I work with the kids to help them, to empower them to be the best versions of themselves, to grow into the best versions of themselves, for all of us, really, for the sake of all of us.
Wow, that's really cool. And so what does it look like? And do you have a certain age range that you work with or all kids? Like how does that actually work?
Yeah, so I work with all ages. Um, with younger kids, it's generally focused around, if there are issues with tantruming, that kind of thing. And with the middle elementary kids, it tends to be maybe some hyperactive behavior. And toward the upper end of that age group, a little bit of anxiety starts creeping in. And so then with the upper ages, the older kids, it's centered around anxiety a lot. And what it looks like is me doing work from a distance. So even when I'm working with families who are local, it's all remotely done. And so I'm having conversations with the parents about what's going on. Sometimes with the older kids, if they want to be involved, they can be, and they have been. But very often, it's the parents speaking with me, communicating with me about what they're seeing as I'm doing the energy work with their kids.
Mm,
Yeah.
cool. So it's kind of it's not like a child is sitting on a call with you and doing something with you. They're
No, no, they don't have to do anything special. They don't have to do anything different in their day. They don't have to sit still. They don't have to show up. They can just be themselves. And the parents and I determine like what's the best time. When do they tend to have some downtime, so that they are not necessarily running around while I'm doing the work. But it
Mhm.
really, either way, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I can do the work in any case.
And do the kids know that you're doing the work?
It's really up to the parents. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes yes, and sometimes no.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some really interesting conversations with like 10-year-old boys about what's going on and what I'm doing and what they're seeing and what they're experiencing. And on the other hand, I have moms who are just texting me in the middle of the week going, "Oh, we're having a breakdown, help!" And I'm just managing it from my end.
Very cool. Yeah, I remember a friend of mine whose son was he had gotten a few concussions and she did some work, some energy work, and he was involved in it, but he didn't really have to do anything, as you said. Like, I think
Yeah.
they did something like said, okay, at 9 o'clock tonight, go lay on your
Yep.
bed and put headphones on and play music, but just lay there. They didn't, he didn't have to do anything. I don't even think he talked on the phone with the person, but he ended up getting such huge benefits from it. I know two
Yeah.
people who actually had really, and they were both from concussions, and they both
Huh.
had really huge healing from them.
That's fabulous. I love
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
love to hear that other people are are doing this. I don't know that many other people who are really focused on doing healing work with kids, so that's awesome to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think this person typically did work with kids, but they had been working with the parents. And then the
Ah,
parents said, you know, could you
yeah.
just do this for me? And it worked out great. And they were both in high school. So maybe, you know, it's a little bit easier to do it in that space. So it seems to me like a lot of people would love to have someone who it's like a little bit um like it must provide a relief for people that it's like, oh, wait a second, you know, someone can come in and do this and I don't actually have to be like intervening and coming up with a strategy and knowing how to deal with this. So how do you explain it to people for how it works and like what would a person, let's just say a kid, let's just do something with like tantrums just for example.
Sure.
So a child is having tantrums. What's the premise behind energy work with a child and how does it help them?
Well, so I mean, with a child as with all of us. So we have the way that I explain it is like this. So we have an energy system, just like we have a circulatory system, just like we have a digestive system. We have an energy system. Eastern practitioners have been working with it for thousands of years, and we're just not familiar with it in this culture.
Isn't like
Um,
acupuncture and acupressure
that
is
was
all
my
rooted?
next,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh, sorry.
exactly. So it's the same. No, it's perfect. It's the same system that an acupuncturist works with. It's just if it's just a different process. And so the idea is that just like in our circulatory system or our digestive system, if we don't attend to it, we can get blockages. Same thing in our energy system. If we don't attend to it, which most often we don't, we end up with blockages, and that can come out as tantrums in young kids. It can come out as anxiety or stress or, you know, all of these sort of behaviors that we see in children and experiences, emotional experiences that we have as adults. So basically, the process that I use helps to just release those blockages. And the important thing to say here is that there are some methods of energy work where you're like going in and you're sort of moving things around and you're manipulating things. And that's not what I'm doing. What I am doing is I'm allowing things to release as they are ready to release. So it's super, super gentle, which is really important when working with the kids. And it's done, you know, the process that I use with kids is sort of the most gentle sort of end of the spectrum of the work that I do. So super, super gentle. And it kind of goes in layers. So we do series, right? A few clearings at a time. And every time we're going just a little bit deeper, clearing just a little bit more. And so you'll see results right away. But it's really with the repeated process that we're getting the clearing, and then also we're training, just like our neural pathways in our brain, we're training the energy. No, go this way, go
Mm,
this way. This is the most easeful way.
mm.
And so then that's where you see the sustained shifts.
Why does someone's energy get like why is someone's energy going the wrong way in the first place? What happens that causes that?
It's just like, you know, we have experiences, right? So we have experiences in our life. We have traumatic experience. We have experiences that cause kinks in the system. So just like a kink in a hose, right? When we have an experience, and it doesn't even have to look like a traumatic experience. We
Right.
know this, right? As parents. So um, we have these experiences, and they create these kinks in our system. And then they create blockages, and if we don't attend to them, then it builds up over time and it becomes more and more challenging to resolve.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So really what you're saying is that it's almost like any of these things that happen that are not just us being kind of like healthy, acting kind of in a regulated state, that when we find those things, that there can be many different reasons for it. There are some people out there who are doing things on like the physical level, and some people on the nervous system level, or I should say like the dietary level is what I had in mind when I said physical. Like they might be doing dietary, but that there can be these energetic blockages as well.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so how does
Yeah.
someone know that that's what it is? Or is there always an energetic component to it?
I believe that there is. I don't, I'm not going to, I don't believe this is the thing, right? Because it's always, we are many faceted. And
Mm,
so we want to be addressing it, addressing our being, our spiritual and our physical being in many ways, with diet, with exercise, with physical manipulation, so all these different ways. And so this is just another facet that is often goes unattended.
mm.
And so I believe that this work can benefit anyone, and that just as having a massage, can be beneficial, so can energy work, just as so many of these wellness practices.
Yeah, that's great. And then do people, do you teach things that then people need to be doing to keep their energy in a better, like more healthy energetic system?
Yeah, so that's the other piece that I bring, right? So ideally, I'm not working with these clients forever, right? So my goal is really to, along the way, I'm offering practices that they can be doing, just on all different levels, with whether, and it's really that's like intuitive in the moment. So
Hmm.
it's not the same for everybody, right? So some people I might suggest an Epsom salt bath once a week, or there are just sometimes it's essential oils. So there are lots of different practices, and suggestions that I make along the way to help maintain the balance, and so that that they can continue and maintain their own energetic system. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, do
Yeah.
you feel like when you're going through this with people that you actually know what it is? Like, are you able to pick up on what the blockage is with people and know like, oh, this is a pattern in your family and this keeps on happening because of this thing? Like, is that how energy healing works?
So it depends on the modality that I'm using. So some of the modalities I'm going to receive more information, and share more information than others. With the process that I use for kids, there's less information that comes, and it's really more of like, just a process that I'm facilitating. But we can definitely go there, if it's requested.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And do you find that people like, do you have a client, a typical client that comes in? Like, are they usually at the point where they're just so maxed out that they're just like desperate and someone says, "Oh, I have this great idea," or is it more like people just are like believe in this and they come to you because they just believe that this is the way to heal? Like, how does that work for people?
I've had both, but for the most part, there's a pivotal issue, right? So there's a reason, there's something that's going on that they're concerned about, and whether it's reached a breaking point, and they've tried a million different things or not, that varies. But usually, there's kind of a key issue that has brought them to my doorstep, for
Hmm.
sure. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
And does it ever not work?
I've never seen it not work.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's with the kids. With adults, it's more. With adults, I see it not work when there's resistance,
Hmm.
because, um, to go more, if I can go more woo than I already am.
Sure.
If the higher, if the higher self, if the consciousness isn't behind it, then they're going to be held back. I've seen that a couple of times, but for the most part, there's always results.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Well, I love having something for people to like another modality for people because I do feel like I was talking to someone recently. They were in a group with me talking about managing their triggers. So it was not about the kids per se.
Mhm.
But one of her children was like really struggling in a lot of ways and having a lot of temper tantrums and having a lot of behavioral, just like things that felt like she kept on just intuiting that they were beyond just kind of normal behavior.
Yeah.
And she had been getting a lot of support, but it wasn't until she went to this one program and they took a much more holistic view. And they did focus on diet and they focused on sleep and they focused on, I don't know if they did energy, but it was an example where just having that and then seeing things shift, the tiniest shift gave her, first of all, a sense of like, oh my gosh, like there's hope.
Yeah.
And then she was able to really see changes in not just her child, but the relationship, the whole family, the dynamic of everything.
Yeah.
And I feel like, there are circumstances where a lot of where parents and children need some extra support than maybe they would normally tap into. Like they might not normally think, oh, I'm going to contact someone and do energy work. But then they hear this and they think, oh, well, geez, I'll give it a try. Like I'll do
Right.
anything
Exactly.
because I need to do this. It's funny because we've had, we have a nervous system that people also don't attend to, and I know
That's
that
right.
they're interrelated, the nervous system and the energy system. I mean, they're all interrelated, but I find it fascinating that we can, have lived as long as humans have lived and to be, as old as I am, and that I only found out that my nervous system contributed in ways that I never understood. You know, you know what I mean? Like it's like they don't teach in, maybe in biology or something, you're learning what the nervous system is on a clinical biological level, but they're not talking about how interconnected it is to your mental health and your well-being and trauma and and your survival brain. And they don't talk about that stuff. And it's such important stuff.
I
And they don't
think that
talk
it's,
about our energy systems.
yeah, and I think that all of that, the fact that it's sort of ignored is really specific to our Western culture.
Yeah.
Like every other culture has some kind of awareness and recognition around the holistic view of well-being. And we are, I think, unique in the way that we sort of pick things apart, and see them as separate, and don't attend holistically.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like when people came to America, they wanted to start over and they wanted to do things like this new way. I mean, that's a very American centric view, but it seems like, it's like, we're just going to do it a new way. And they kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And instead of seeing that, like, there's just so much, I'm glad to see that things are starting to come to, like, more and more people are
Yeah.
bringing, integrated, because I really believe that there's so much greatness in the ability to, like, I really want our hospitals to be able to deal with acute situations really well. So it's not that I'm
Of
discounting that,
course. No,
but
of course.
but can we take a more holistic view? Can we understand that these body parts of us, like, we don't actually always need medicine, sometimes there are other ways to take care of this. And we also don't know, but I'm also just going to acknowledge something else too, which is, I think a lot of the parenting I'm noticing even in me, I'm going to call out something in me, like a sense of like, um, there's like a sense that the parents always need to be like fixing behaviors and,
Yep.
or that it's someone's fault that a child is acting a certain way. And,
Yep.
there's this way that we do that, like we want to, it's like the same reason why we want to have a diagnosis, and instead of just saying like, whoa, wait a second, we're all human beings in these bodies that are getting impacted by all kinds of things in our environment. And it's okay. Your child acting out that way might actually be like a good thing, because this is, like, for example, I look at things like tantrums. I'm like, that might be the only way they can express themselves.
Sure.
It might be literally the only way they can express themselves. So I try to encourage parents to look at tantrums as, tantrum is actually just another way of expressing something that they don't have words for yet. You can either
Absolutely.
pathologize it, or you can
Yeah.
look at it as just another great place for you to say, huh, like, what's going on in our environment? What's going on in their life, what's going on between us, what's happening here that I'm not understanding and they're not able to use words to explain to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. And I want to make a distinction actually, um, which a client of mine spoke to really, really beautifully. Like their son was 2 years old and he was having huge tantrums, and they couldn't figure out where they were coming from, and it was kind of more than you would expect from a
Mm-hmm.
2 year old. And so after we worked together, they were like, okay, so now he's just having regular tantrums. Like now we get, there are tantrums, right? And then there's like this kind of off the edge sort of behavior. And so really recognizing that it's developmentally appropriate, right? Some of these behaviors that we see, as you say, are really developmentally appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not taught that either.
We're not taught that either.
Yeah.
No, we're not. And we're not taught that. And then because we're not taught that, the challenge is we do make it wrong. We do make their behavior wrong. And we're trying to control it and manage it instead of flowing with the emotions and flowing with their expression. Yeah, but I'm appreciating the difference. It is help. I think it's helpful to see that there are some parents who intuitively are knowing that something's wrong here. This isn't exact. This is more than what I think would be developmentally appropriate, and then hopefully for them to reach out and get the support that they need, and you know possibly be working with someone like you who could help them in probably a shorter time frame maybe too than sometimes when they go through. I think some of these programs that they go through, it's like, oh, is there ever going to be an end to this?
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like what you're talking about is like more a matter of a few sessions maybe.
Yeah. I mean, a month minimum and usually 3 months to really sort of lock it in, um, depending on the child. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, so what
Yeah.
got you into working with kids? How did that transition happen for you when you had been working with parents so much?
It was more of it was like I was working with parents, I was doing the parent coaching, and then I found my way into the world of energy work. And I
Mm-hmm.
really played around there for a while. And so when I was doing that work initially, I was working with adults and,
Mm-hmm.
mostly around stress and anxiety and that and that. And then I found my way back to the families.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly they found me. Mostly it was like, can you also do this for my kid? And then what happened was I really realized, I recognized this is my wheelhouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Working with the families. This is what I feel like is what I have to bring. It's important to support our families, parents and children. And I know you were saying you were reflecting on your sort of own perspective, and I know for myself, what happens for me is when I see something in my kids that I feel like is my fault, we can do this funny thing where we then get angry at them, like you know what I mean,
We
like it
project it out
triggers
to
us
them.
and
Yeah.
then we project it out on them. And so it's like we have to pull it back and see, okay, is there a behavior here that I'm concerned about? Is there a trigger for me somewhere in my own experience and has nothing to do, there's just so many facets. And I find it really fascinating for my own journey to explore that space and to recognize, when is there something that really needs to be addressed in my kid, and when can I just let him be
Yeah,
and
it's
address
like
it
I
later.
almost picture like that we have to do a better job of separating it. Like I can picture a piece of paper for people and like when you have a behavior you're concerned about, like have like a your corner, what's your stuff in this? Like what's the developmentally appropriate stuff in this? What's happening for your child? And then kind of like what's happening between all of those parts. Because it is true. There is a way that
Yeah,
we can sometimes be afraid. We can either feel guilty, like we've done something wrong, or we can feel
that's right.
afraid about what their behavior is for them and for us. And it gets so murky then. It gets so
Yeah,
murky and we can't see clearly.
that's right.
Yeah. Well, but it sounds like because you also have experience working with parents, it sounds like you probably are able to bring some of that into that with them as well, maybe. Like bring in the
Yeah,
help them to
I
work
often
through
do.
some of those pieces.
Yeah, if and when it's appropriate, I
Yeah.
do. Yeah, and also if there's really a need for sort of intensive parent coaching, I don't do that anymore. So
Mhm.
if there's a need, then I will refer.
Yeah.
For
Great.
sure.
Well, so what we started with, and I think this was really helpful to understand this, is the question of like, how can we empower our kids to improve our future? So I'd love to hear, because obviously you do this because you love kids and you love families and you care about kids and families. So can you give me your take on that, on the question?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Um, so what I see is that, obviously our kids hold the future. They hold the future in their hands. And so, when I see the kids, I'll just say my 12-year-old son, he just has he's like so um on board with gender fluidity, and just takes for granted that everybody should get, that global warming is a thing, and just kind of like they're growing up with this sense, a really shifted paradigm from what we grew up with. And in order to allow them to kind of really occupy that space and unhindered
Mm,
from whatever baggage we might be bringing from our previous paradigm, right? Or the paradigm of the larger culture around them that might not be holding those exact, that real sort of vision and those values. Um, they need to feel empowered to believe what they believe, and I mean, as we all do, right? But my focus is on the kids, and to trust themselves, and to hear their own voices, um, because in that trust and in that listening, then their voices will grow louder, and they will bring that future that we want to see, that more empowered, um, more connected, um, communicative, thoughtful, future.
mm,
And so my sense is that anything that we can do to empower that space for them, to allow and encourage them to stand in who they are, to know who they are, and to speak who they are, that to me is like, that's my clarion call. Like,
mm.
that feels like the most important thing that we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I do believe that. I say to parents, sometimes parents will say things to me like, I'm not doing enough. Like, I need to be giving back more in the world. And I'm like, you are literally creating the future of humanity by parenting. Just wanted to make sure that you are understanding what an important job you have, just in case you had any doubts on that. Like, it's actually a pretty important role.
Yeah.
How does one empower their kids to have that voice and to to stand up and to speak it? To the more important, I think, that you said, and I like that you emphasized it, was like to even just hear their voice, to know their voice, to know
Yeah.
their perspectives, and to be able to stand up and to speak it. So how do you feel like we need to be doing that in our parenting? And I would assume probably also just in school and in the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, we, I think that schools are coming around more, although my kids are in an independent school environment, so I don't know. I can't speak really clearly to the public school experience, but I think that, the first and most important thing is just listening, just allowing them to speak and not speaking over them, and not, jumping in and interrupting what they're saying, or correcting their ideas, encouraging them to explore those ideas. Oh, really? You think that? Interesting. What makes you think that? Or, you know, should we find out more about that? So,
Mm,
you know, listening, right, is a way that it encourages speaking.
yeah.
And we do tend to, at least the way that I was taught from my parents, right? There's this sort of dominant, paradigm, and so sometimes we speak over them, and we want to tell them what we know, and it's all in the best, it's all in with the best interests.
Totally.
We just want the best for our kids. So a really simple way in parenting is just to listen.
Yeah. And as you said, it's also not that easy for some people, because it's just
Oh,
like the nature, it's what it was done to us. Some people, some parents, I think people in our generation may have had some parents who were really good listeners, but I think a lot of parenting was like a little bit more, yeah, like we know, no, 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 just hurry up.
yeah.
Like, I'll just tell you what you need to know. And because that's just how it was. So it's harder. It's a practice for sure. I mean, if that's
Yes.
one thing people could take away from this call, it's just one thing. It's just like, okay, we can first of all, we can know that we have available to us energy healing, but then what we can do is we can become better listeners. And I know listening's hard, and it's fascinating, because one thing that I see happen with parents is they can be really good at listening when the child agrees with their views,
Yeah.
and they can be very excited and proud and all of that. And then one of the questions is, what happens when our kids come to us and they say something that doesn't feel like it's aligned with what we believe? Like, how do we listen then? That's the
So challenging, right? So challenging. And that's where the invitation to explore an idea comes in, right? That would be my response. My response would be, if this is if we're when we're challenged, then allow them to just go deeper into, well, why do what makes you, where do you get that information? What makes you think that? Like, where does that belief come in?
yeah.
What other ideas might you explore around that can clarify your beliefs?
Yeah. And I think one of the things for all of us to watch out on is to not be trying to do that to get them to believe what we believe. You know what I mean? Because
Oh.
sometimes we're like, oh, maybe we're like either offended or bothered by that. One thing I noticed with my kids, and I found it to be fascinating, is that they will, well, so there are a couple of things, and I don't know why I want to say this first, but when I was younger, I was in my teen years, and I used to say things to my mom, who was like pretty much, I would say, Democratic. I mean, it was a little different back then, because that we would be like, we're Democrats. Now everyone's like liberal, left, right, whatever. But I had a really good friend and her boyfriend, who are now married, and it's been years. And they were more Republican, and so I would take a Republican view to my mom, and then I would argue it with her, and then
Oh,
and then I would go back and argue her points to them. And so, I was so thankful that my mom was always willing to engage in that kind of banter with me.
Hmm.
And so so that's one thing I encourage people. Sometimes I think kids just want to be able to, like, they're just pushing up
Push.
again against an edge. Partially, it feels good to push up against an edge. It just feels good for, I think, teens to be like in that little bit of like a contrarian place. I think that's just a fun place for them to be often. But I also think that it's sometimes them trying to get more information on the places where they feel they're not shored up. So like if someone asks them
Mm.
a question, they're like, oh, that's a good point. Why does that happen? So then I would go to my mom and be like, but mom, what about this? What about this thing? Like, how are you going to make that point? And then she would
Yep.
tell me, and I'd be like, oh, that's great. And then I could go back and make that point to the other person. I find my kids, they will, this is something that I really feel is an important nuance to empowering our kids, which is when they come to us with something that that we disagree with, that is a moment for us to be so proud of our parenting, that they
I love
felt that
that.
they could bring something to us, that they knew that the family kind of value isn't this, but they felt safe enough to bring that to your home, and that they felt that they trusted you enough with that thing that they will probably never utter to anyone else, because because maybe it's just outside of like, I mean, we're in a pretty liberal area, you're in a pretty liberal area. So like my kids will come home to and say things to me sometimes, and it'll be something they would never probably say to in school. But the fact that they can
Mm.
say it here,
Yeah.
I'm like, thank God they can say it somewhere. And
Yeah.
so I remember the first time my son said something that really like floored me. He was about 13. And luckily, I had already learned in my marriage to say this phrase, which is tell me more. So I just said, tell me more.
Yes.
And I'm like breathing, you know. But what ends up happening is that if I can really allow them the space to share it, I realize, first of all, we're a lot closer than I thought we were on whatever the issue is. I just find that in general with anyone I talk to, you know, like there's a lot, much more common ground than there is um, disagreement if you get personal with it, you know, if you start to really understand the other person, you know. But I also find that they just want a place to be able to process it.
Yeah.
They just want a place to be able to process the stuff that they hear on the news and in this place and that place. And they're like, they need a place to process. And that's what we need to be for them, is the place to process so that they can find their own opinion. They can find their own voice. They can step out and be bold sometimes and say something that maybe other people disagree with. And,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. That's really
yeah.
good. I have my 12-year-old never fails, bedtime. He still wants me to put him to bed. And as soon as he hits the the pillow, it's like all of the ideas come out, all of the processing of the day. It's just he just needs to talk it out. And so yeah,
Mm.
it's just we just listen.
Yeah.
That's fun.
That's, yeah, that's good. I think, but I think you're making some points. There are also other things that are happening, I think, whether we know it or not, in our kids in this generation. No matter whether you are being raised in a more liberal or conservative environment, it doesn't really matter. There are just changes in the world. Like it's a more global world.
Exactly.
We have access to more information. Even if in the past, maybe your community would not have embraced, let's just say, like homosexuality the way that, you know, other communities will, you're going to be exposed because you're on Snapchat and you're on Instagram and it's just or YouTube. And so the world that used to have little itty bitty cultures, like within cultures, communities and cultures within cultures, it's like all of our cultures are kind of like spread into each other's now. And so it is an interesting time for our kids to be exploring. You know, do you think though it's a source of, in the kids that you see, do you think it's a source of also anxiety and confusion for them too? Do you feel like that's,
I
or,
think that I think where the anxiety comes in is the um just the pace of information.
mm,
So not necessarily the content,
mm,
but the pace of receiving information, because they are growing up with technology. I mean, this is another big piece around empowerment. I think, and I'm finding my way with it because I have a challenging relationship with technology.
mm,
Um, and so, I have certain ideas about it that I try to be aware of. Um, but I think that for our kids, it's part of their evolution. I mean, it's part of our evolution as a species for whatever reason at this point in time. And so I'm grappling with it a little bit, as you can see, but I think it's important that their ability to engage with this platform and find their way, sort of in and amongst the volume of information. And my hope is that, that they will be the generation that will find a balance to the platform, that will recognize. And I think that, in this interesting moment we're in right now, where technology is so, it's like a lifeline.
Yeah.
We're seeing some of the balance and imbalance, like the connective ways it can be used, and also sort of the overwhelm of just using it all the time. And so to bring it back to the question, I think that the anxiety comes with the pace of information that they come into contact with. And I think that that's just part of what we're experiencing evolutionarily as a species, and that we need to sort of find our way through it. So my hope
Yeah.
is that the work can help sort of release some of the extra energy and anxiety around it, to allow for a more balanced engagement, like to allow for a way to allow them to engage and not, and sort of find their way to the balance. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. I want to timestamp just where we are for people who
Sure.
are listening, because even though you might listen to this in, 5 years from now, it's April 21st when we're recording, which is in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. So just that's what we're talking about here, about the fact that we're in the midst of a time where there are a lot of people on a lot of technology, way more than maybe we normally would be with Zoom calls, and kids being on, all types of technology to stay connected to their friends. I know my kids are doing a lot of gaming. My older son wasn't a huge gamer, but he has become one because of this, and he's having a blast with his friends. And my younger
Yeah.
son was much more of a gamer and just loves it. He loves it anyway. He loves it. He has more freedom with it right now.
Yes.
but
Yep. Here too.
but so one of the questions, so you were talking about teenagers there a little bit. We were talking about like or like the older kids who are exposed to technology, and that the volume is definitely overwhelming for them. And so when you do the work with them, is it like, I almost felt like, I don't know why I got this hit when you said it. So tell me if this seems like this is even remotely accurate, but like, is there a way that the energy work is also like clearing out that which is not theirs? So like,
Oh, for sure.
okay.
Yeah. Keep talking. Go ahead.
Well,
I'm
I
sorry.
was going to say like that. So there's a way that, like, when you're talking about empowerment, when you do this type of energy work, that there's the way that what happens is we're constantly being layered on like shoulds and like this conflicting belief and that thing. And where do we fit in all of this? And then it can be hard to find who we are and where our center is. So you're saying kind of this energy work, it can kind of clear out the stuff that was never meant to be attached to you or in your system anyway, and then kind of get you back to yourself.
Yeah, so that's another huge piece that I didn't address initially when you asked me about the work. But yes, we are always absorbing. I mean, we're always absorbing. So I could really sort of go into the science here, but we have an energy field that's scientifically measurable, and we're always coming into contact with other people's energy fields. And then there's the collective energy field. So we're always taking on energy, and the question for our system becomes, how much do we absorb of that? And
Mm.
different people to varying degrees. So yes, we are clearing that out as well.
So you can see how it would be really helpful for people, for kids or teenagers who don't fully understand. Like as an adult, if you started to understand this, you can start to do your own practices to
Yeah.
to kind of clear this. But if you weren't understanding, you might think that. Like I even know people who say this, who consider themselves to be empaths. Like I know people who say things just like, "Oh, I have a hard time knowing what's mine and what's theirs."
Yep.
And
Yeah,
so you can imagine
absolutely.
kids who have no idea, and they come home from school and they're just so flooded,
Yes.
from so many people's energies fields all mixed together. And
100%. And it's so personal, some people more than others. And again, depending on the age and the interest and how long we're working together, we can bring in practices for the kids to be doing, if they want to sort of learn to manage that boundary for themselves.
Yeah, that's great. Again, another thing that I'd like to see in our schools, I'd like nervous systems and, more
Yeah.
Eastern, medicine, Eastern philosophies, as well as this energy space, I think, for people. And, and I think it's funny, before we got on the call, we were both saying that we were clearing our throats. And then we were talking about our throat chakras, and like that there must be something important to be said. And so I'm curious, is your work, I think that's more familiar with a lot of people, or chakra work. Is that part of? what you do?
So I'm not clearing for the chakras specifically. Um, yeah, so that's not sort of the focus of the work that I'm doing with kids, but it's certainly addressing it. I mean, I'm clearing for the physical level, the emotional level, the energetic level, so that all gets addressed. So
Mm.
it's not just like I'm clearing for the chakras. So it's really clearing for the whole system, the whole body system. Yeah.
What about comparing? I'm bringing these up for people so we can have like the people who have already heard some of these things, but they might not have heard at all. Like, what about comparing to Reiki?
Okay. So with Reiki, um, and I don't practice Reiki, so I'm just speaking from my understanding, is that a practitioner is attuned to the energy of Reiki and then shares that energy with the
Mm.
client to attune the client um, to the energy, which can be beautiful.
Ah.
However, in this practice, my energy is never uh, I'm not sharing energy with the client. I am only sort of clearing the energy that's no longer needed from their system. So there's no sort of potential for my energy to mix with theirs.
Mm. That's cool. And so, I mean, it really it means a lot to me because one of the things that I stand for, and that we joke in our house because, like, if I had an ideology, so I try really hard to not be ideological about even politically. I try
Mm.
really hard to not bring ideology into the home because I actually don't believe it's the same as a value system. Some people do, but I do not believe that. But what if I had an ideology? It would be that my children are free thinkers and are empowered and who stand for them what they believe in, even if I disagree with it. So that is one of my ideologies if I had one. um and so I love the idea of my children having access to uh, other methods, if you will, other ways to be able to clear so that they can see and be who they are. Because I do feel like it's so hard. I mean, I feel like as an adult, I've been practicing trying to come back to who I am for the past 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still on the journey of trying to know who I am and who I am in the midst of all this stuff happening in the world, and where do I fit in, and how can I be how can I be me if it means that I'm not going to then belong to this group? Or there's a lot of stuff
Mm.
that we're all, I think, grappling with these days. Do you feel like for the kids, do you feel like teenagers, like, do they talk to you, or do you see this around, like, around our so yes, we have coronavirus, and I think that's a good thing to talk about too. I'd love to see what you're seeing on that. But as it relates to even before that, just politically and culturally, you said that you think it's probably more that it's the amount or the volume of content. But do you think they pick up on, like, the divisiveness and the leadership and the things that are happening in that way too? Are you feeling like that's impacting their,
Yeah, yeah.
their
I
ways of
mean,
being?
that's where that collective energy that I alluded to before
Mm,
comes in, right? So we um it's just to bring it down to the microcosm rather than the macrocosm. Like when you walk into the room and there's somebody who's angry in that room, you can feel it immediately. Like they're angry, and so that you're just picking up, you're feeling their energy, and so that happens on a larger scale too, and
mm,
we're just not aware of it because it's not as obvious. We're not like walking into one space from another. We're just always surrounded by it. And so yes, I believe that the collective energy impacts us. It creates anxiety and stress in all of us, our kids and adults, and that we all need ways to manage it. Whether it's what I do or other approaches, everybody needs the practices that help keep them grounded and balanced. Especially at times when there's sort of such collective struggle politically, you know, just in any way, the divisiveness is palpable,
yeah.
and it's not just. I mean, we can moderate our exposure to a certain extent. Excuse me. If we choose to go on social media and read the news, then we're going to experience more of it. But regardless, it's there, and we're receiving it.
Yeah, but like I think both of us agree that there's like some way that what I see you doing and what I believe in, which is part of why we're talking, is that we all do need the ability to equip ourselves to be in a world that is chaotic and uncertain and has divisiveness in it, and still be able to be in our center and to hold on to ourselves and to be empowered and to stand up. And because that's you know, you use words that I use, which are like the microcosm and the macrocosm. It's like, you know, it's easy to think we need to change someone out there in order to make the world a better place. But really, like if you know, billions of us all decided to clear our own energies and to do our own work and to be in our own center, we would clear things up like that.
Yep.
You know, it would clean up the collective in a heartbeat. It's just that we haven't gotten enough people who are able to be in the midst of the chaos and not get consumed by it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Fascinating. That, yeah, it's so fascinating to me. So let's talk what you're seeing right now, if you'd be open to it. What are you seeing right now with coronavirus? Are you having a lot of parents come to you and needing support, them and their kids? What's the...
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of parents needing support. Excuse me.
That throat chakra.
Throat chakra. I think that at first it was like there was silence because everybody was just kind of trying to figure out, like, oh, okay, how am I going to manage these four walls, right? How am I going to manage the situation within my own home right now and just like find my balance? And it can be overwhelming. And so now is when I'm really starting to see parents reaching out after they've sort of created some kind of routine, or, you know, there's some kind of regularity of experience that's been happening. And so now they're like, okay, looking for, how can I make this better?
Yep.
How can I find a little bit more balance? What am I seeing with the coronavirus? That's a really big question. So I'm going to take it on one level, and we can always go other places with it. But I'm going to say that talking about kids, I think that this is going to be, I mean, this might be an obvious statement, a definitive experience in their young lives. And, you know, I mean, let's think about other sort of historic moments that, you know, that defined a generation. And this may not be as, hopefully, dire as the experience of, you know, World War II or the Depression or the Spanish flu, or, you know, but there are these defining moments, and I believe we're in one of them. Yeah. And so the way that we respond, right? So this is one of the things I see in this moment. The way that we respond is going to imprint and inform our children and their trauma response throughout their lives. Yeah. And so their experience as they, you know, both as they sort of embody what their experience is right now, and also how they reflect back on it. So there's two different, right? There's the embodied experience, which is they won't necessarily cognitively be aware of. And then there's the remembering, which is the cognitive awareness. And so the way that we manage as parents in this moment is really going to be important for them. So that's one thing that I see.
Yeah. Do you have any specific thoughts on what parents could be doing to, I mean, it's like I'm sitting here with that question of thinking, and because my kids are a little bit older, and because I'm a relatively calm person these days, and, you know, I feel like I'm not going out of my way thinking about that. But I'm wanting to, like, I'm appreciating your invitation in some ways. And so then it has me saying, like, what do I want? Like, what would I want? Like, who would I have to be to ensure that their experience when they walk away from this, when they, did we just have a moment, a little blip?
We did. It's okay. We're good.
Okay. Like, as I sit and I think about this, I'm appreciating thinking about, like, is there anything that I want to do differently to make sure that when they look back at this experience, I mean, I have done some of it for sure, but I'm thinking about it a little differently right now. Something about the way you said it made me think about it a little differently. Are there things that you're either like, I'm feeling hesitant to ask you the question, like, what should people do? But to the best of your ability, what should people do?
It's a good question, and I have an answer that I hope you're gonna like, which
Oh, it's
is
okay.
less. Do
Mm-hmm.
less. Expect less. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just don't make it like, I'm seeing these memes all over the place, like, and I know they've been responded to a million times, but if you don't come out of this with whatever, with a new, improved whatever it is.
Right. You can
and
play an
and I
instrument.
just, yeah, I just feel like, please, let's take the pressure off.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, this has been said many, many times, but whether or not, regardless of what our situation is, some people are in severe trauma right now. Like, they don't have, their income has stopped, and they don't know where they're going to get food, and there are varying experiences right now. But even for those of us who have maintained our income, and we are all experiencing the collective trauma, and it is exhausting.
It's
And so,
exhausting.
yeah, so if you need to sleep more, sleep more. If you need to watch a movie every night, watch a movie every night. If you need to let the kids have more screen time, let the kids have more screen time. Like, don't expect more right now.
Yeah.
Expect less.
All right. So that's beautiful, because I think a lot of people are grappling with that. I posted something this morning on Facebook and said, geez, I'm usually an insatiable learner, and I just feel like I'm not even drawn to doing the learning that I normally learn. And not to say I'm doing nothing, but I'm just normally I'm almost like competing in my life. Oh, I want to listen to this class, but I have to cook dinner, like, so. And these days I just want to cook dinner and not have something distracting me. I'm feeling like I want to be more present with just whatever I'm doing. And I am noticing I want to sleep more. I do notice those things. And it's so easy being a highly productive person that I am to just be, more tough on myself but I just keep coming back every single day, reminding myself these are really, really unique times. And it's okay to just rest when you need to rest. Or if you feel a surge of productivity, follow that. That's fun too.
Right.
Nothing wrong,
Totally.
no judgments of what you do, but it's the part, what I hear the most, like, the loudest voice I hear between the two of us is, listen to yourself. Like, honor and acknowledge what you're going through. Honor, acknowledge your experience. Notice that you're being impacted by a collective energy, and acknowledge that. But then also come back to what's true for you. It's okay. Like, I've really never used this word so much, but I have been lately, is compartmentalization.
Hmm.
And I've been saying it's okay to, like, go read the news and experience it. And if you have a big feeling about how hard it is for someone else who's dealing with, navigating something that you're not navigating, but it's really hard, it's okay. Feel that. Let that wave move over you. But then you can also compartmentalize it. You can also say, oh, I'm now done feeling that, because I'm going to go be with my kids now. And I want to be present with them. And so I want to go, like, lay on the floor and play some Legos and be in the moment with them. So I don't want to bring all of that with me. I'm going to let that stay in that little area of my day today, and then move into something else. What do you think of that? What do you think of, do you think you can compartmentalize? Do you think that's
Yeah, I
possible?
think it's important. I mean, I think it's important. I don't know if that's the word I would use, but it does the trick. Like, I think it's important to be able to be aware of what's going on. Like, I feel like it's important to to stay abreast for myself of what's going on in the larger world, but also to not allow it to drive me crazy. To also say, okay, I'm aware of that, but I'm also aware of these other things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also aware that right now I'm in my home with my kids, and the best thing that I can do is to be present. I'm also aware that I am a larger being, and I am here for, at this moment, for whatever purpose that it is. I'm living in this moment, and whatever comes of it, it's the reason that I'm here. And so it may be really, really hard. It may, it may look all kinds of different ways, but I'm going to do my best not to judge it. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to try to just recognize that. And I really, truly believe that I'm here in this moment for a reason, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to live it.
That's beautiful. And I notice that idea that, you're acknowledging that you're like staying connected to the news, to the, do you know what's going on in the world, but that you're able to then see you're holding many truths is what it really is. You're holding many things to be true. You're not letting them all seep in together and then become just this unconscious pool.
Right.
You're kind of saying, wait a second, I'm going to consciously do this, and I'm then going to consciously do this, and I'm going to consciously do this. And and that's not to say that there's never going to be a moment when you're doing one thing and you're present, and that's not, I mean, it's not like
Yeah.
that. Like when I say
No.
even compartmentalize, I use that phrase for people because I think it's a more concrete visualization
Totally.
for people.
Yeah.
But I
Yep.
think that the truth is, like, I mean, I could be sitting with my kids, hanging out, playing a game with them or something like that, and then something comes into my mind. It's not like that. It's not like nothing ever
Of course.
penetrates my presence. I mean, I wish, like the Buddha, I want that. But we are human beings, but it's just the awareness is the key. It's the awareness. It's the intentionality about our day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we're in a moment, sort of the extension of this would be, when we're in a moment with our kids or cooking dinner, and we do experience an overwhelm of anxiety, or we do experience these big emotions that seem to have nothing to do with what we're doing, then to be aware, oh, okay, there's this other thing that's going on, and it's impacting me,
Yeah.
and to just, I would say, if there's one thing to come out of this with, right, it would be just to be gentler with ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's been my message too for years, but even more so right now is like, it's like, I almost think we have gotten to this place in our society where we're so intense and we're so hard driving that, generally speaking, people could not be more gentle with themselves. Like, it's like, come on, a bit more. Like, I want you to do more. Like, or you couldn't be so too gentle with yourself, I should say. You couldn't be too gentle,
Yes.
because the natural tendency will be to have that driving voice that's telling you what to do and how you should do it. And so it's like, to remember to be gentle 25 times in a day will never be enough gentleness.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
bring it on, more
Yes.
gentleness. I know.
Yes.
And then it helps me to be more gentle with other people, and more gentle with my kids, and more gentle with my partner. And, I know it's so crazy. So I like it. So I think that it also goes hand in hand with something else that we did say before about empowering our kids, which is listening. And I think those two things also go hand in hand, because if we're gentle with our kids, and when they come down and they want to talk to us about something, and it does sort of, we're in our own state, we're feeling anxious or something, it's like, how can we hold gentleness as the overall feeling in that moment? Like, gentle with ourselves, gentle with them, gentle with what we say, and we don't have to abandon ourselves. We can even say something like, hey, listen, just give me a second, I do want to listen to you, I want to hear everything you have to say, and I just need a moment to just kind of get myself together, because you caught me in a moment that I was feeling some big feels, and that's okay too. And it's a hard, it's a hard time. And I think our kids are often not telling us what they're going through because they don't have the words. I mean, we barely have the words
Right.
to
Yeah.
say, to talk about what is happening in this world. We're all trying to figure it out at this very moment. And so I think our kids will be more likely to act out their feelings. You know, it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how people used to be like, oh, my kids are acting out. And I'm like, I never understood that before until I started to understand, wait a second, let's take that literally. They're literally acting out things that they don't have words for.
I love it.
Right? They're literally doing that.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay. Like, they
Yes.
should be acting it out if they don't have
They're
words for it.
expressing.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Like, you
Just going
want
back to the
them,
tantrums. Absolutely.
yes, like
Right. At
you
whatever
want,
age.
exactly. Like, you want them to act it out, because if they're not acting it out, then it's going in. And
Yeah.
what we know is that anything that is not expressed out is being expressed somewhere. And if it's being expressed in, sometimes, man, that is some of the hardest, most painful stuff to be dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, the inner projection, the inner pressure, the inner
Oh, yeah.
anger, the inner sadness that we don't
Yeah.
let come out.
That's right.
It's so amazing. So I have so loved talking to you today. It's been so sweet. There's so many insights. There's so many places we could continue to go. I want people to be able to find you. And
Mm.
so I'm wondering if you can just share, like, is the best place for people to go to is your website?
Probably. Yeah. So my website, and then, if they want to get in contact with me, they can just fill out the contact sheet, and I respond within 24 hours.
Great.
So all of my info is there.
Okay. Why don't you just say it out loud in case people are listening? And then I'm also going to put it
Sure.
in the show notes.
Okay. Yep. It's natanyalara.com. And I can spell that if it would be helpful.
So I'm going to put it in the show notes. I'm going to put it on the screen as well. And I'm sure
Perfect.
people will be able to find you. Your name will be all over the place on this. And I'm going to
Yes,
include
ma'am.
your, great. And I will include your bio and all of that in the show notes as well. But before we actually bring it to a final close, I like to ask one question, which is just, is there anything else that we didn't get to talk about that you would like to share here with people?
I don't think there's anything that comes to mind. I think we really touched on all the points that feel important.
Good.
Yeah, yeah. I
Good.
would just say be gentle with yourselves, and the other thing that I would say is that we don't do enough is reaching out for support.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
whatever
it's,
that looks like for us.
yeah. And you know, what's interesting about that is I've seen some people who, there's a kind of this funny thing that's happening that I wasn't able to put words on until yesterday, which is some people who tend to be more, maybe a little bit more introverted. They're, they are longing for some of the social connection and support structures, but they're also overwhelmed by the amount of connection that they're getting in their home, or the amount of, I should say, the lack of quiet time they're getting in their home.
Yeah.
And so then there's this confusing thing that they're dealing with, which is they're overwhelmed. Their nervous system feels kind of
Mm,
overwhelmed by the amount of time that everyone's together, but they
mm,
are longing for something else that they're not able to,
mm.
they're not like sitting down and identifying. And so they're not reaching out for that support
Yeah,
because they
that is
kind of feel like, I don't want to talk to another person. I can't talk to anybody right now. I'm overtouched. I'm overstimulated. My kids are all over me. I don't have a minute to myself. But what they need is something to nourish them.
yeah.
And so that's what you're saying is like this, get the support you need and identify that. I don't,
Yeah, and
you know,
maybe it's like, you know, if you have a partner, asking your partner, I need an hour of just quiet. Can you help me do that? Like, ask for that
mm,
support. You know what I mean? Like, give
yeah,
me support so that I can be alone.
that's a
I mean,
great
whatever it is.
distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever it is that we need, let's make sure that we get it in some way.
Yeah, I know the other day my husband came in and he said something to me and he's like, "Oh, are you okay? You seem distracted or something." And I said, "No, you know what? I just can tell it's rising up in me that I need to go somewhere on our property, like somewhere in like my backyard or something, and sit and tell everybody to leave me alone for an hour. I need to be, even though people don't even need me that much, it's just that people just kind of walk in my office, in my home office, and plop themselves down, and I love it. And I also just need an hour every once in a while that's like completely
Yeah.
my own.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much. I love what you're up to. I so appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your heart with us today. So, it's great. I'm glad people have you to be able to tap into if they need some more support.
Thanks, Deb. Super fun to talk.
All right, great.